Alright, what's up? So I started off this channel with the banger idea of what if Anakin Skywalker started a slave rebellion. So if you like Star Wars or this type of content, expect more what ifs or fanfics, lore videos, video essays, and reviews about all things Star Wars, but why don't we just dive right on in. Our story starts off on Tatooine during the events of the Phantom Menace. In this timeline, Anakin doesn't win the pod race. The 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker looked on in disbelief as he saw his rival manage to speed past him and catch him off guard. This sent the boy hurtling towards a sand dune, destroying his speeder and only injuring him slightly. But he failed, and that failure told him something. Life, and especially the galaxy, didn't care about you. It didn't care if you were at the bottom, and you'd have to claw your way to the top. You ever heard Qui-Gon talking to Obi-Wan about something called a midichlorian count, and that it was the highest they'd ever seen? That was the only reason Qui-Gon cared so much. If he didn't have the midichlorian thingy, he wouldn't even look at him. He looked at his mother, the only person who seemed to understand. Even while everyone else was laughing and booing, she smiled. And then he looked at Padme. He thought she would do the same, but her gaze was cast down in a sorrowful look. Watto smiled, as this meant he got to keep his prized possession, and Qui-Gon sighed. He really thought the boy would win. Qui-Gon tried to bargain with the Toydarian, but to no avail. Watto wouldn't budge. Qui-Gon was beginning to grow annoyed. He had what he suspected to be the chosen one right here, but this flying rat was keeping him from bringing Anakin to be trained as a Jedi. He unconsciously reached for his lightsaber, but he stopped himself, slowing his breathing and calming himself down. Striking down Watto would lead to the dark side, and would be a bad representation of what the Jedi stood for to Anakin. If he was right, this young boy was the chosen one, the being who was said to bring balance to the Force, and he would need someone to guide him in that direction. Qui-Gon felt as if it was his responsibility since he discovered Anakin. However, since the boy lost the pod race, Watto won the bet, meaning he got to keep Anakin as a slave. Qui-Gon would find a way to free Anakin, even if it wasn't today. The Jedi Master knelt down at the boy's level, putting his hand on his head. I will find a way to free you one day, and I promise you will become a Jedi. Anakin wanted this to be true, but he only nodded his head and watched in disappointment as Qui-Gon got on the ship, and he looked at Padme, who told him and his mother to keep on living. She would find a way to repay the kindness he gave her one day. And so Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Padme departed in their ship, and as Shmi, who was next to Anakin, smiled and waved. She knew her son wanted to go, but maybe it just wasn't meant to be. And when she beckoned Anakin to return home, she couldn't find him anywhere. In a panic, she desperately searched for her son, but he was nowhere in sight. She returned home, only to find a note saying, "Sorry, Mom. I'm gonna come back and free you one day, and everyone else. I'm gonna follow them and become the strongest Jedi there's ever been, and when I come back, everything will be better. But for now, I can't stay. I'm sorry. Love, your little Annie." Shmi, with tears in her eyes, looked at the note, and then went outside and looked up at the sky, smiling, realizing that was her son's destiny. At the same time, Watto flew over and asked where Anakin was, and saw Shmi look into the sky, and she told him, "He's gone." Watto was angry, angrier than he had ever been. His property was gone, not thanks to that filthy Jedi most likely. Anakin had stuck aboard Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Padme's and Jar Jar's ship and hid from his sight. That was until he felt the stomach rumble and he went searching for food. As he was snooping around, he ran into Padme and they both startled each other. "Annie, what are you doing here?" she asked. Looking for food," the boy told her. Qui-Gon heard a familiar voice and walked into the room to see Anakin talking to Padme, and he looked at the boy inside. "Ran away, I'm guessing. Young one?" the master asked. I guess you caught me. Please don't send me back. I can't. Not yet. I need to become a Jedi. I need to get stronger in order to free my mom. Please train me, Master Qui-Gon Jinn," Anakin begged. Obi-Wan walked in and chuckled, and Qui-Gon sighed once more. "Very well." And with that, the events of the Phantom Menace played out the same until Qui-Gon's death and the burning of his body. Anakin was sad, angry, and everything else a 9-year-old boy could feel at the loss of someone like Qui-Gon. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had a father figure. Watto was just a cruel, bitter bastard, but he saw Qui-Gon in a way that a boy would see a father. And as Anakin looked at Qui-Gon's body, Palpatine looked down at Anakin, and Anakin looked towards him. Palpatine smiled and nodded, but Anakin felt something. He felt a darkness within Palpatine, but he didn't know how to explain it. Anakin was brought back to Coruscant and was brought in front of the Jedi Council where Obi-Wan told them he was going to train the boy. Like in canon, Anakin is allowed to become a Jedi, and Obi-Wan knelt down to Anakin and put his hand on his head just like Qui-Gon and told the boy, "I will finish what my master started. I will train you to become a Jedi." Anakin smiled and nodded. And just like that, 10 years passed, and Anakin was now 19, and was on a mission to protect Padme. It was the first time he had been with her in a decade, and she was just as beautiful as when they had first met. But just like he had in canon, he had dreams of his mother. He told Padme he needed to go to Tatooine. It was time to free his mother and to stop the dreams about her. So Anakin and Padme left Naboo and traveled to Tatooine. Once there, Anakin went to the first place he remembered, Watto's shop. Memories came flooding back from his childhood, and Padme and Anakin made their way inside and looked around, and Watto heard customers coming through the door. He asked if they were looking for anything specific, or if they were here for the special merchandise. Anakin was confused. He didn't remember anything about special merchandise, and Watto saw those confused looks and told the two to follow him. And in the back room, Anakin saw his mother. She wasn't free. She didn't become a wife. She had been here for a decade. She was battered and bruised, and Watto said for a certain price he could have his special time with his slave. Anakin looked up when he realized Watto had turned his mother into a sex slave. He was forcing her against her will to do depraved things for 10 long years and kept the profit all for himself. Rage seethed within Anakin, and Padme could see this, and so did Watto. The Todarian flew back a little bit and told Anakin that ever since a little slave bastard ran away, he needed to make a profit, so he used the next best thing and used Shmi as a source. Anakin looked at him, and that's when Watto realized this was Anakin. Annie, is that you? He asked. Anakin didn't say a word. He proceeded to force choke Watto as Padme watched. He gripped harder, squeezing the breath out of the flying rat. Padme tried to stop him, but he pushed her aside and ignited his lightsaber and proceeded to gut Watto. The Todarian dropped dead, and Padme looked in shock. Anakin ran over to his mother to try and break her out of the restraints. Once he did, she fell into his arms. She was severely injured and looked as if she hadn't had any water or food in days. Anakin spoke to his mother. "Mom, I'm back, just like I said I would be. I'm here to free you now." Tears welled up in his eyes. Shmi smiled, looking at the man her son had become. "My boy, look at how you've grown. It's okay, Annie. I love you." And with that, Shmi drew her final breath, dying in Anakin's arms. The Chosen One held his mother's fresh corpse. Tears streamed down his face. He set aside his mother's body and walked over to Watto, unleashing his lightsaber and striking his corpse repeatedly, Anakin's eyes flashing between normal and yellow while he did so. At the same time, Yoda and Palpatine felt the disturbance in the Force. They felt Anakin in great pain. Yoda cast his glance downward in a sorrowful glance, but Palpatine smiled. He could use this to make Anakin turn to the dark side and become his apprentice. After a few minutes of continuous strikes to Watto's body, Anakin fell to the floor, tears streaming down his face. Padme ran to his side and hugged him, all the while Anakin bawled into her shoulder. He stopped his crying. The Chosen One shouldn't let his emotions run wild like that. He apologized to Padme, who told him it was okay. Then he told her everything he was thinking. This is all because I was weak. I was born weak. My mother was weak. We were property. We weren't even considered to be living beings. We were owned. Slavery is the problem. It's a scourge that rots the galaxy, and I intend to wipe it out. The Jedi, the Sith, they only fuel this. I'll get rid of them as well, and anything or anyone who gets in my way will be destroyed. And when Anakin turned around to look at Padme, she saw his eyes. One was normal, but one was yellow. Anakin had tapped into the balance of the Force using both the light and the dark side. He would try to achieve a noble goal, but he would do it in any way that might get him there, even if it meant killing others. Padme was lost for words. Here was the little boy she had met so long ago, and now the man that stood before her. Even with the loss of his mother, he pushed forward for the betterment of the galaxy, even if it meant using any means necessary. Even if it meant wiping out the Jedi. Anakin told her, "You're probably disgusted with me." She told him that she would help him with his cause, and then the two shared a passionate kiss. Hours later, Anakin and Padme stood over Shmi's newly digged grave, and Anakin gave his final goodbye to his mother, and as he held onto Padme's hand, he put his plan into motion. He would first rid Tatooine of its slavers. Anakin returned to their ship and made their way to Jabba the Hutt's palace. Anakin confronted the fat alien and told him it was over. Jabba laughed, calling Anakin a little Jedi fool, and he sent bounty hunters after him. Anakin killed them all and proceeded to force choke Jabba, and then gut him just like he did Watto. With that, Tatooine was free from rule, and Anakin and Padme proceeded to go to Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan, and the events play out the same as an attack of the clones, and the Clone Wars begin. During the Clone Wars, Anakin set his true plan in motion with Padme by his side. After Jabba's death, Tatooine fell into chaos from the power vaccine, with multiple other crime lords trying to vie for power and take control over the Outer Rim. And throughout this chaos, Anakin managed to find a way to control certain crime lords to do his bidding. They would be useful, but after they fulfilled their use, he would kill them. But Anakin used them to free multiple other planets from slavery. Unbeknownst to the Republic and the Separatists, another group was forming, one with Anakin Skywalker at the helm. The newly freed slaves managed to take control of their planets, and they formed a coalition that was taking over the Outer Rim. And soon after, a few years into the Clone Wars, the coalition was a powerful threat to both the Republic and the Separatists. Palpatine had heard of the newly freed slaves banding together, and he laughed, thinking how pitiful they were. They would have no place in his future empire. The Jedi and Republic had learned of this new coalition as well, but didn't see it as an immediate threat. They would find a way to deal with it after the Separatists were defeated and the Clone Wars ended, and Anakin sensed this with his new balance in the Force, feeling both the light and dark. He felt the light from the Jedi, but also the darkness of the Sith. He felt Dooku in the Force, but that wasn't the main aspect he felt. He felt both the light and the dark were on Coruscant. Of course with Yoda and the rest of the Jedi, but Anakin pondered about this darkness. He recognized it, and then he remembered, and one face came to mind. Palpatine. Anakin realized it then and there. He had been playing both sides of the war. Palpatine was a Sith Lord the Jedi had been searching for. He laughed, thinking how Palpatine attempted to grow close to him, all just to manipulate him to destroy the Jedi. The Jedi and Sith were responsible for the current state of the galaxy, but he would change that. As more time passed and the events of Revenge of the Sith came closer, the ideology of freedom from Anakin's coalition grew, and across the galaxy, multiple beings in slavery rebelled and took control of their planet, and in turn strengthened Anakin's slave rebellion, while the Separatists and the Republic grew weaker. Ahsoka and Rex would go to Mandalore to deal with Maul, and Palpatine would be kidnapped. Anakin and Obi-Wan would go to rescue the Chancellor, and Anakin sensed the darkness from Palpatine. Dooku would knock out Obi-Wan and the fight would commence, the same with Anakin and Dooku. He would cut off his hands and hold both lightsabers to the old man's neck. And when he heard Palpatine tell him to kill him and to do it, he smiled. He would play the Chancellor's game, and so Anakin killed Dooku. Palpatine would be freed, but he felt something was off. There was no hesitancy from Skywalker. It was as if he knew he was being played, or if he was attempting something of his own. The events of Revenge of the Sith played as normal, and Anakin begins having dreams of Padme's death. He didn't want to lose Padme like his mother. He knew this was either some Jedi or Sith mind trick, but he needed to figure out how to save his wife, end slavery, save the galaxy, and truly become the chosen one. He looked out the window, and as Padme hugged him from behind, he found out that he was going to be a father. Now Anakin had another thing in his life he needed to protect. Anakin sensed it. Soon everything would change. The coalition had built an army of 1 million freed slaves and created an army that could rival the Separatists and Republic, and Anakin was going to use that to free the galaxy from its shackles. The dreams continued, and Anakin talked to Yoda as well as Palpatine, both giving him advice, one leading to the light and the other the dark side. But Anakin saw another path, one with the light and dark. Anakin saw the flaws in both the Jedi and Sith. The Jedi had strayed from their path, and the Sith were always itching for power. Both needed to be fixed. And Anakin, he created a plan to do this. He found Ahsoka and told her everything, and that he's the leader of the new coalition, and she was shocked. But he asked her to join him, and together they could help everyone and lead the galaxy to peace. No more Jedi, no more Sith, only balance. Ahsoka couldn't say no after she had dealt with Maul. She joined Anakin and Padme. At the same time, Palpatine was trying to manipulate Anakin to become his apprentice, and Anakin knew what he was doing, but he pretended to become susceptible. The Chancellor revealed he was the Sith Lord and asked Anakin to join him, and he came up with a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. With the Jedi Council off-world, Anakin set his plan into motion. He acted surprised and said he would tell the Jedi, and after telling Mace Windu, the Master told Anakin to stay in the Council chambers, but he smiled. A battle would play out the same, and Anakin would go to Palpatine's office to find him on the floor with Windu over him. He had killed the other Masters, and Palpatine begged Anakin to save him, and the Chosen One smiled. As he thrusted his saber through Windu's chest, killing him, the Sith Lord smiled, thinking he had won. Anakin had discovered the clone troopers' ships in about Order 66. He would use Palpatine to get rid of the Jedi for him. Anakin pretended to become Palpatine's apprentice, even being named Darth Vader. But when Palpatine executed Order 66, Anakin snuck up from behind and stabbed him in the back. The last thing the Sith Lord saw were Anakin Skywalker's eyes, one normal and one yellow. Anakin picked up one of Palpatine's lightsabers, and then picked up Windu's lightsaber. They would be a reminder of those who stood in his way, but were now dead. With Order 66 now executed, clones across the galaxy started wiping out the Jedi. Thousands were killed, and the clones were even marching onto the Jedi Temple, killing everything in sight and laying waste to it. Some Jedi managed to escape and survive, or push some clones back, since Anakin wasn't with them, but a majority were still wiped out. Anakin made his way to Padme, and she felt that she would soon go into labor. Obi-Wan had killed Grievous on Utapau and made his way back to Coruscant after surviving the Order, and Yoda did the same, and they both met up with Anakin. He had already deleted their recordings of him killing Palpatine and Windu, but Yoda sensed something was off. That's when he noticed the two lightsabers on Anakin's waist, and he noticed one of them was Windu's. Yoda glanced to the side, staring at Anakin, not saying a word, only unsheathing his lightsaber and igniting it. Obi-Wan was confused, asking Yoda what he was doing, but Yoda told him, "The truth young Skywalker is telling, he is not." Obi-Wan looked to Anakin, and the Chosen One smiled and began laughing. So you fools finally caught on. Windu was in my way and needed to be taken down. Obi-Wan was shocked. "Fallen to the dark side you have, young Skywalker," Yoda spoke. "Unfortunately, that's where you're wrong, Master Yoda. Palpatine was in my way too. I killed them both." Anakin proceeded to explain everything, from losing his mother to freeing the slaves and creating the Coalition, and to his thoughts on the Jedi and Sith. After hearing all of that, Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber as well. Anakin sighed, pulling out his two new sabers, one purple and one red. One eye normal, the other yellow. But that's when Ahsoka showed up and saw what was about to happen and jumped over the two masters to join her own master and ignited two lightsabers as well. The Chosen One spoke. "Join us or die." The two masters didn't say a word, and Anakin took the silence as their answer. He launched forward at blinding speeds towards Yoda, and Ahsoka raced towards Obi-Wan. Yoda used his agility to jump circles around Anakin while he used the two blades to strike where he could and try to predict Yoda's movements. But Yoda blocked each strike perfectly, but Anakin had more strength and he was growing more into his potential. He was getting stronger by the second. Each strike pushed Yoda back a bit, but he still managed to outspeed Anakin and keep up. Meanwhile, Ahsoka had rushed towards Obi-Wan, who blocked both sabers, and the two engaged in a close-quarters fight. Ahsoka had grown stronger after her fight with Maul, learning to harness both the light and the dark, just as Anakin had, but Obi-Wan still had the upper hand. Obi-Wan begged Ahsoka to stop, but she wasn't listening, and as she went for the next strike, Obi-Wan cut her arm off, which caused her to jump over him, to try and stab him from behind. But Obi-Wan had the higher ground, and cut both of her legs off, and used the Force to slam her into the wall, knocking her out. Anakin saw his apprentice be defeated, and Yoda was pushing him back, but he still managed to keep up with the Grandmaster. But if Obi-Wan joined in against him, he knew he was going to lose, so he spoke to Obi-Wan. "Master, don't you see what's happened? Look at the galaxy. War, suffering, slavery, and death. That's all it's ever been. There have been bouts of peace, but the galaxy has always been plunged into war and chaos because of the Jedi and Sith. You lost your master and lover, and are told not to feel, but that's wrong. You can't look at one side of the Force, you need both. One can't be more powerful than the other. The Jedi and Sith need to be destroyed." Obi-Wan paused. He pondered, thinking of his master, and maybe this is why Anakin was the Chosen One. Maybe this is why he was bringing balance to the Force. Obi-Wan dropped to his knees and looked at Ahsoka and asked, What have I done?" Yoda, hearing this thought, he never saw the rising darkness of the Sith or the downfall of the Jedi. Maybe after all these centuries, he wasn't fit to lead the Jedi. Maybe young Skywalker was right. And so with that, he dropped his lightsaber and looked at Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka. He sighed and walked out, disappearing forever. Anakin deignited his new sabers and went over to Obi-Wan, telling him this was the way it needed to be done. He walked over to Ahsoka and picked her up. He brought her to the same medical facility as Padme, and Ahsoka went under surgery to repair both her body and add new limbs. Padme gave birth to twins, who she and Anakin named Luke and Leia, and the two couldn't be happier. But there were still the problems of the clones killing Jedi across the galaxy. Anakin and Obi-Wan traveled to Kamino to have the chips removed from every clone trooper, but the ones that were still fighting, Anakin sent his coalition army to annihilate them. They outnumbered the remaining clones 10-1, so they didn't stand a chance. Padme then went before the Senate and revealed everything about Palpatine, how he played both sides of the war, but also the Jedi, and how they were responsible as well. But ultimately many were killed due to Palpatine. Anakin then stepped up and everyone saw him as the hero of the Republic. He revealed everything about the Coalition and told the Senate the Republic and Coalition would combine to create the galaxy's coalition of planets all across the galaxy. Every rim would be connected. No more slavery, no more war. only peace. The Senate respected this, and in due time, the Separatists were absorbed into this new form of government. Anakin, with the help of Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, would create a new order, one focusing on balance, on both the light and dark. Luke and Leia would grow up, with both of their parents both being trained as Jedi and taught about politics from Padme. Anakin would become the Grand Master of this new Grey Order, and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would be on his council. Yoda would never be heard from again, self-exiling himself to Dagobah, where he would spend the rest of his days until his eventual death. Anakin would take his order off Coruscant, going back to the roots of Force users to expand their knowledge, learning from both Jedi and Sith teachings, but using them in their own way, not straying into the light or dark. The slaves Anakin freed and the surviving clones became the new army of the galaxy, and they initiated something called the Stormtrooper Project, where anyone could join the army. And so the galaxy was finally at peace. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, had freed slaves all across the galaxy and wiped out slavery entirely, creating a rebellion to fight back against the Jedi and Sith, and he fulfilled what the Force had created him to do, to create balance in the galaxy. There is light, and there is dark, yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. And with that brings us to the end of our story. If you liked the video, then be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know what you thought about it, if, there's anything you would change, or, if there's anything you would add. But yeah, I guess I will see you all in the next video. Peace.